You know, there are some moments in life that hit you so hard and so fast, they feel less like reality and more like a cheap jump scare in a bad movie. But trust me, this was real, and it was about the ranch my father bled for. I was sitting halfway through a lukewarm cup of instant coffee, the kind that tasted like burnt sand, out in a sun-scorched tent somewhere nobody wanted to be, when Corporal Reese burst in, waving an envelope like it was about to detonate, and he just slapped it down, saying with that slow Arkansas drawl, "Boss, you gotta read this, because I think some folks back home just decided they own your house now." I stared at him for a second, waiting for the punchline, because bad news usually meant my transmission blew up or maybe my girlfriend dumped me. It never meant a full-blown property heist, right? But the second my eyes scanned that official notice, my jaw locked up so tight I actually heard a little click in my ears. It wasn't a personal letter, no, it was this formal, smugly written document from the so-called HOA, the very association I never even belonged to, stating they had legally auctioned my Ironwood Ranch, gone, to cover unpaid community upkeep fees. The words were so absurd, honestly, I almost laughed until I saw the date of the auction. 3 weeks prior, right in the middle of my deployment, and my name wasn't even listed. They'd replaced me entirely with absentee owner, like I was some deadbeat ghost who'd just abandoned the dirt I grew up on. I remember Sergeant McMillan, my law buddy turned PI, later told me over a static-choked satellite phone that the theft was orchestrated by the HOA president, a woman named Kerren Vance. He said she had the warmth of a broken refrigerator and the ego of a dictator, and she'd managed to push the sale through under the guise of improving neighborhood cohesion. That phrase alone, cohesion, made me sick. This land, my land, the land I'd paid off in cash before I enlisted, was now being carved up for some flimsy, beige subdivision called the Willow Creek Commons. My weathered ranch fence, where my father's initials were still carved into the post, was gone, replaced by a vinyl banner flapping in the dust. That was the image that broke me, the final, unforgivable insult. And that was the moment Operation Reclaim was born. I didn't care about my deployment schedule anymore. Kerren Vance was about to learn that you don't try to steamroll a soldier with friends who know how to legally and logistically take apart an entire neighborhood. I was walking through the map in my head before I even had the plane ticket. The flight back was a blur of recycled air, but the minute the Texas heat hit me, that thick, dry air that smells like freedom and sunburned earth, the fury settled, transforming into this quiet, cold calculation. Mikey, my old friend, was waiting for me. He didn't waste time. He just handed me a cold soda, looked me square in the eye, and said, "Dusty, she's gotta go." As we drove towards what used to be my front pasture, I saw it, my old barn painted an ugly beige, and a wide-open entrance with a cheap wooden sign arching overhead, the Willow Creek Commons. Just beyond it, where my cattle trough once sat, were rows of identical houses, their yards looking manicured to the point of being plastic. I told Mikey to pull over, and I just sat there, letting the reality sear itself into my memory. Because this wasn't just about getting the ranch back anymore. It was about erasing every single trace of their claim from the land, every fake street sign, every plastic shrub. My first move was to confront the snake herself. I walked into the squat little HOA office, which felt too small for the level of tyranny she wielded. And there she was, Kerren Vance, perfectly styled hair, a blouse too crisp for Texas, and eyes that sized me up like I was a piece of junk mail. "You must be Mr. Hayes," she said, that syrupy tone hiding a razor blade. "That's right," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. "And you've been trespassing on my land." Her smile tightened, a nasty little thing. "Oh no, see, this land is part of Willow Creek now. Sold at auction weeks ago. Perfectly legal," she finished, like reciting a manual. I stepped forward until we were toe-to-toe. "Lady," I said, very slow and quiet, "I was halfway across the world serving my country when you pulled this stunt. And you and every single person you sold to are squatting on my ranch." She actually laughed, a quick, dismissive puff of air. "Well, maybe you should have kept up with your fees." We can't have empty land bringing down property values. That was the line. That was the moment I knew she didn't just want the land. She hated the idea of my rugged, honest ranch interfering with her pristine, fake community. I told her she'd be hearing from my legal team soon, and it wouldn't be from a strip mall office. And then I walked out, leaving her caught mid-smirk. From that moment on, it was pure, cold recon. I used my old army cap and scuffed jeans to blend in, snapping photos, noting license plates. I even borrowed a trick from a buddy and posed as a pizza delivery driver just to map out all 32 houses built on my property. My best find, though, was Jed. He was a retired trucker, one of the newer homeowners who was already at war with Carolyn over a lawn gnome violation. When I told him the truth, his face lit up with the kind of righteous anger only a man who's been pushed too far can feel. He confirmed she'd been doctoring expense reports and handed me a flash drive of old meeting minutes he'd been holding onto for years. Dynamite. Then came the heavy hitters. My lawyer, Mr. Alastair, a wiry man who lived on black coffee and stubbornness, was practically giddy. He found the legal violation was rock solid. And then Adianya Sharma, a deputy county attorney, called. She wasn't smiling, but her voice carried this calm authority. She told me she'd found a clerical error on the county recorder's plat map. The subdivision's boundary was unclosed. Translation, she said. The central streets and a good chunk of the lots still sit on a master parcel that remains in your name. I felt the ground shift. This wasn't just about my title anymore. This was about road access, water lines, and the day-to-day life of the entire subdivision. Anya, Alastair, and I filed the papers immediately, securing an injunction to freeze all construction and suspend the collection of HOA dues. We made sure every single filing had a letterhead on the cover page, the United States Army Legal Department. When the sheriff personally served Carolyn, she tried to laugh it off, but the voice crack was enough. The paranoia had set in, and I knew she was sprinting ahead of the law, but we were already closing the net. The final phase began not with a bang, but with a series of well-placed surgical strikes. First, I had my two surveyor buddies, Boone and Ruiz, roll up in a beat-up truck and start systematically mapping the property, planting bright flags that cut straight through the new community park. Boone, with his patient, unbothered demeanor, just telling the nervous homeowners the county was confirming access rights pending a legal review. The tension was thick enough to taste. Homeowners clustered, staring at the flags, glancing nervously at the HOA office, clearly wondering if their mortgages had just become worthless. Then I struck the fatal blow. The former HOA treasurer, shaking like a leaf, met me behind a feed store. He slid a notebook across the table with neat columns of payments disguised as reimbursements, office furniture that never arrived, and landscaping by a company that shared a bank address with Carolyn's sister. Fraud. Embezzlement. We turned the whole ledger over to the district attorney, and just hours before the plat hearing I saw it pop up on the county docket, State of Texas versus Carolyn Vance, preliminary hearing on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and violation of the SCRA. When we walked into the hearing room, Carolyn was already there, flanked by her lawyers, her face pale, her jaw set. I kept my testimony short. I simply told the commissioners my father had bought that land breaking his back in the oil fields. And I'd been halfway across the world when strangers tore down my fence and put up a sign for a place I'd never agreed to be part of. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Carolyn's defense was a train wreck. When a commissioner asked why she had ordered a lien on a non-member, she stumbled. When Ati Sharma pressed her on the shell buyer, she said she'd been misled, which drew a skeptical murmur from her own neighbors behind us. The worst moment was when a commissioner asked if she'd been aware of the SCRA protections for deployed service members. She said she'd heard of them but didn't think they applied here. That sentence hung in the air like smoke, and Alastair didn't miss the chance to point out that ignorance wasn't just a bad look, it was a violation of federal law. The next morning, the lead commissioner read the decision into the record. The amended plat for Willow Creek Commons was invalid due to the unclosed boundary. The HOA's lien and auction were null and void. All disputed parcels revert immediately to my ownership, and any structures built on those parcels would be considered part of my property. The room went silent, then exploded in murmurs. Carolyn's head dropped slightly, the motion of someone who just felt the floor tilt completely under their feet. Her lawyers started whispering furiously. Outside, reporters swarmed. She pushed past them, face tight, not answering the questions. Did you knowingly sell land that didn't belong to you? Did you misuse HOA funds? I stayed long enough to give a short statement, saying I was grateful and that I looked forward to working with the county to transition the land back into proper stewardship. I watched Carolyn's black SUV peel away, and I thought about how quickly power unravels when it's built on nothing but paper lies. Later that day, I walked the perimeter with Mikey. The sheriff's department was closing the HOA office. Carrying out file boxes, Carolyn's nameplate tossed unceremoniously into a cardboard box. In the distance, the beige houses looked almost fragile, like pieces in a game set up on the wrong board. Boone and Ruiz joined me, and Ruiz, ever the practical one, asked what I planned to do with the houses. I told them I'd already decided. The law might have given me every single key, but I wasn't about to use it to punish the people who were duped, just like I was. So, I'm going to auction off the majority of them, with the proceeds going to repay the homeowners who'd been paying illegal dues and mortgages this whole time. A few I'll keep for rental income, just to make sure the land never falls into the wrong hands again. And as for that terrible sunflower fountain they put in the community park, I think I'm going to move it into the middle of my pasture. A little trophy, a bird bath just to remind me how absolutely ridiculous the whole thing was. But that's where the story ends for now. I got my ranch back, and Kerren is facing a long, long road in criminal court. The question I keep asking myself, and the one I want to ask all of you, is this. When people buy a house, are they morally obligated to verify the deed and the plat, or does the responsibility for this kind of disaster fall entirely on the HOA president and the system that failed to stop her? Were those homeowners victims, or were they co-conspirators in their own negligence? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and please hit that like button if you think justice was served. And maybe, just maybe, let me know what you think I should do with that hideous sunflower fountain.